There were mass killings, so this lies under category A in the convention. There was also sexual violence, even on monks. This is another point. In general, what happened in Tigray shows us the 4 acts of genocide.
Abraha also added that the Allied forces committed clear crimes on the war in Tigray and said that they should be brought to justice for their actions.
أقسم عونت من يوم كنت تصلوا كم منجستي لا إثيوبيا منجست زمرق زلوا أكلت.
For example, if we ask who are responsible for what happened in Axum, the people leading the Ethiopian government, Eritrean government, and their military, and those that directly committed the atrocity should be held accountable, not just in the international court, but also anywhere in the world where they are members of universal jurisdiction, including Ethiopia or Tigray.
Amnesty International managed to issue a report on the Axum massacre in February, while Tigray remained under a complete communication blackout, and the Ethiopian government continues to deny access to human rights groups from accessing Tigray and conducting an independent investigation into the atrocities committed.
A report by the rights group says that soldiers from Eritrea systematically killed hundreds of people in the city of Axum in November.
Amnesty International this Friday has accused Eritrean and Ethiopian soldiers fighting in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region of carrying out a massacre against hundreds of civilians in a likely crime against humanity. Amnesty says that evidence of the atrocity last November in the town of Axum is compelling.
Mouz Gede, a researcher at Tigray Institute of Policy Studies, stated in his previous interview with Tigray Television that the intentions of destroying a society have been clearly demonstrated in the past year of conflict, and that the crimes committed in Tigray amount to genocide.
Thousands of innocent civilians has been killed because they are Tigrayans. The political elite of Tigray has been persecuted, killed, and there are many people still whose whereabouts is not known. So the very intention of destroying a given society, in part or in whole, has been demonstrated both in action and from point of view of the nature of the war declared against Tigray, and also conceptually, which has been enshrined in the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, all has been fulfilled. So from those points, we can say actually what has been committed in Tigray is a genocide.
Mouz also added that what happened in Tigray is unlikely to continue to stay in the corner of the Horn, but instead sure to have a spillover effect, destabilizing the peace and security of the Horn, primarily due to the presence of Eritrean and Somalian troops in the genocide in Tigray.
Wherever genocide has been committed, it has caused regional instability. What happened in Rwanda has caused instability and political crisis in the neighboring countries and in the Great Lakes region. What happened in Kosovo between the Serbs and the Kosovos and between the Serbs and the Croats has actually caused a problem in the Balkan region. And so in general, we can say theoretically and empirically, we can say wherever genocide has happened, it has a spillover effect into the region. When we come practically to the Ethiopian and Horn of Africa reality, Ethiopia is an anchor state. So anything that happens in the negative in Ethiopia is going to affect negatively in the Horn of Africa. And practically there is also a new danger which the world has to be very careful. And it has to be taken as a warning actually. The involvement of the government of Somalia, Eritrea, in the internal affairs of Ethiopia in order to annihilate the Tigray people and the Tigrayan elite shows there is a build-up of a regional structure of genocide. So this regional structure of genocide is going to be a very grave danger to regional peace and security. It's not only a danger to regional peace and security, it's going to be also a bad example to other neighboring regions, both those regions beyond the Red Sea and to adjacent regions like the Eastern African region and the Central Africa region, or even to other regions in other continents, because it's unprecedented how different states has committed themselves to ally with a government which has declared genocide on its people is unprecedented experience. So we can say it's not only a matter of usual case of lack of peace and security, but a regional structure of genocide is being built up in the Horn of Africa.
A year has passed since the massacre in Axum, but loved ones of victims are no closer to receiving justice, making their loss all the more unbearable.
The massacre of Mariam Danglet is one of the bloodiest massacres committed during the Mariam Tsiyon festivities last year. Eritrean soldiers killed over 160 churchgoers commemorating the annual ceremony. The church recently held a memorial service for the innocents killed as the families of the victims continue to call for justice and accountability. Aragawi Gabra Mikael has more on that.
Mariam Dangalat is a historical church located in eastern zone of Tigray in just 19 kilometers from Adigrat. Normally, thousands would gather in this ancient church to celebrate Tion Mariam Festival, an annual ceremony celebrated across the state. But on that day, in 2020, Eritrean troops would commit a horrific crime, killing 164 churchgoers. A once festive holiday turned into a bloodbath.
Alexander Burhane Bahardar.
His name is Alexander Berha. He was an engineer. He graduated from Bahardar University. Last year, the Eritrean troops came to this holy church and opened fire on a crowd of people. Elders, youngsters, children, and choirs were among them. They massacred many elders and children.
Mr. Emana, who lost 2 of his children and 5 members of his family, was forced to spend 3 days with the dead bodies and even denied to cry loudly out of grief. He remembered the horrific incident as follows.
We were at mass in the church and later went home. After we reached our house, they started firing guns from the side of the church. We closed our doors and stayed inside in fear. They smashed the doors and came inside. They were armed with big guns. I was sitting with my children. My brothers and his family were there as well. They first shot at the barn and then at my daughter. I screamed in shock and went to pick her up. I saw my son laying there dead as well. Another relative, Isaias Asgadam, was there. He had come from Adigrat for the religious ceremony. He was also killed along with his son, his sister, and others. We were helpless. We couldn't do anything. We spent the night surrounded by corpses. Both of my children were dead, and the third one was wounded. The only thing we could do was protect the bodies from being eaten by hyenas. One of my sons was a newlywed. He had married in mid-November. He was killed in front of his bride, and she was shot too. I spent the night with 7 dead bodies and 2 injured family members.
This one was 16 and this one 19. The Eritrean troops first killed my husband and his 85-year-old father by throwing them into a hole alive, then killed my sons, though I begged them. I told them they were just children. I had so much hope for my children. I had hoped that they would not only change my life, but also that of their community.
Eritrean soldiers, in further attempts, community would not allow the families of victims to properly mourn or bury the dead for days after the massacre.
After begging for 3 days, we were allowed to bury the dead. I asked them if they would allow me to cry, for I had lost my 2 children and my brothers, and they gave me 5 minutes to cry for my loss. Imagine, I had to get permission to grieve. 6 priests were killed from the church of Mariam Dangalat, and I also saw 17 children choirs of the church of Debre Tsahai, Selassie at Edaga Hamus, taken by the Eritrean troops marching them in the row.
We were not even allowed to bury the dead. They always threatened to kill us and said, "We will not allow anyone born from you to stay alive." I've never heard of such kind of brutality even entailed.
The Mariam Dangalat massacre, like many others, was not included in the joint investigation by Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the UN, leaving families to ask when and how they may be able to get justice.
Every inch of Tigray is washed by blood. The mountains of Tigray are surrounded by the bones of victims. We need an impartial body to investigate what happened in Tigray. Properties looted, people killed. We need another body to investigate, one other than the perpetrators themselves.
We need an impartial body to conduct an investigation, a body that cares about human beings. The Ethiopian government cannot be trusted. They cooperated with perpetrators of these crimes who killed all these children. What was their fault? The troops of Isaias Afwerki have killed children and destroyed countless numbers of monasteries and mosques.
While relevant international bodies remain mute on how or when justice may be served for the victims of the Mariam Dangalat massacre, the families and friends of the victims seem determined to ensure that it is.
Addis Ababa University, the oldest higher institution in Ethiopia, released a bizarre statement late last week threatening to retroactively revoke the academic degree of graduated students that it said were supporting terrorist groups. The Global Society of Tigray Scholars later released a statement condemning the 9-point resolution and calling the university's actions unprecedented. For more, Haile Gabru reports.
Addis Ababa University issued a statement on November 26 in which it warned former students of the possible revocation of their degree for supporting terrorist groups. In a word statement sure to spark confusion in intellectual circles, the university issued a 9-point resolution where it vowed to intensify support for the war front and scolded the Western world for support to terrorist groups. The statement condemned what it called undue pressure on Ethiopia by the international community. It is to be recalled that the international community has so far failed to take decisive action against Ethiopian authorities, but has repeatedly asked for an immediate start to negotiations and to end the siege on Tigray that has blocked all food aid and medical supplies from coming into the region. The university in its 9-point resolution also condemned international media for biased reports on Ethiopia and strongly indicated that conspiracies by the US and other international bodies to support Tigray People's Liberation Front, Tigray's elected political party, and finally expressed its willingness to partake in what the university referred as a war for survival. The statement issued on the university's official website has very little indications about the practical implication of the resolutions and how it may affect Tigrayan graduates of the university. The Global Society of Tigray Scholars and Professionals released a statement denouncing Addis Ababa University's recent statement. Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars and Professionals calling the threat to retroactively revoke individuals' academic degrees deemed to be supporting specific political parties unprecedented. Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars and Professionals stated that the statement is contrary to its long-standing values and unfair to basic human, political, and more importantly, intellectual right, and asked that the statement be retracted. Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars and Professionals is called up on regional and international partners of Addis Ababa University to strongly denounce the politically charged and academically irresponsible statement and re-examine their engagement with the institution.
Last week, the World Food Programme WFP reported that an estimated 9.4 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance in North Ethiopia. Ago, a minority group in the Amhara region bordering Tigray, are just some of the people severely affected by the ongoing siege. Our reporters were on the ground to observe the harsh conditions on the ground. Blinken has more on that.
The Ago are an ancient people living in the north end of the Amhara region, neighboring the people of Tigray. The Ago people once ruled the Ethiopian Empire through the Dagwe dynasty that lasted for centuries and are at the heart of Ethiopia's ancient and colorful past. Now, a minority in the Amhara region, the Ago people are just one of the many suffering due to the ongoing siege on Tigray.
I have twin children and I can't feed them. I don't have any breast milk because I'm hungry as well. I used to pay $300 every month for my home. However, now let alone paying for rent, I don't even know how to feed myself to survive. This happened as soon as the Ethiopian soldiers arrived here. But now as the Ago forces control the town, we at the very least have peace. The fighters help me by themselves. I have nothing to eat. I got nobody else to help me. I'm sick because I have nothing to eat. There's no food to eat. We get these breads from monks. I have nowhere to go. My children are starving. I'm very worried. When the Tigrayan and Ago forces captured the town, they gave us some food that lasted for a few days. However, we're back to being hungry now.
The head for the interim government for the district, Nabratis Fakiros, stated that this was mainly caused due to Ethiopian soldiers and Amhara militia that are blocking aid from reaching those that are in need.
The people are starving. The aid coming here was blocked in Kombolcha. Children are becoming more susceptible to disease. The starvation happened because the people of Ago were instructed not to plow their land when the Ethiopian forces were here.
The 5-month-long siege has discontinued all basic services, including electric power and all forms of telecommunication, and blocked all basic supplies, including aid and medicine, from reaching Tigray.
The systematic attack on health facilities in Tigray has resulted in the complete destruction of over 80% of Tigray's health facilities, while the ongoing siege on Tigray that has blocked off all essential goods, including food and medical supplies, has made it impossible for the health system to revive. Our reporters visited Adishandhon Clinic in Magala, the clinic that has completely run out of all basic medical supplies, while it is expected to continue to give care to dozens of children and mothers suffering from malnutrition and many more living with chronic illnesses. Bethlehem Ayala has more on that.
For the past 5 months, the people of Tigray have been under complete blockade with no essential good, including food aid or medical supplies, being allowed into the region. The 5 months long siege had been preceded by an 8 month long occupation of Tigray by hostile armies that systematically destroyed health facilities and schools. Adishandhon Clinic is a health facility located in Magala. Doctors and nurses at the facility say the siege had made it impossible for them to continue to provide health care for the patients.
We have 40 patients with HIV, TB and diabetes. We needed to treat them with the medicine we get from Ethiopian Pharmaceutical Agency. But since the roads have been closed, we have nothing left to give them.
We used to give them proper medications, but after the crisis and the siege, we are unable to give them what they need.
Mothers and children have been the primary victims of the ongoing siege. The blockade of food, in addition to a discontinuation of health services, has had a devastating effect.
We have 42 children and 64 mothers here suffering due to malnutrition. We have been giving them medication for some months, but now we can't give them anything.
Mothers and children are so underweight. It doesn't even seem like we can give them a syringe. They're so thin.
The ongoing siege has made life exceedingly difficult on the people of Tigray, especially mothers and children responsible for the primary care of any household.
For now, thanks for watching. Do stay tuned to Tigray Mass Media NC. Bye for now.